This tutorial is going to teach you how to write calculation formula in FileMaker. I'm going to start with the absolute basics and teach you step by step how you can create a calculation formula in FileMaker and do things like using a function, merging text, and also doing some simple maths. Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome to another FileMaker beginner tutorial. My name is Sunny Chu and today our topic is calculation basics. So what we're going to work on today is this sample file here we have. This is a very simple contact database with the full name, age, and also the gender for that person. And our goal today is to create the fourth field, which is the calculation field that we will be creating. And we are probably going to create about 8 to 9 different examples of calculation. And the way that these examples are designed is that we are going to start from the easiest to the hardest. And each step along the way is going to be slightly more difficult than the last step. So through the process, I'm going to introduce to you little bits and pieces about how you can work with FileMaker calculation. So by the end of this tutorial, you should be able to have a very general, basic understanding of how to write a calculation formula in FileMaker. So let me give you a quick overview of what this tutorial is going to be about. So this tutorial is going to be split into 3 parts. The first part, we're going to start with something very basic, like how you can work with math and number. And then I'm also going to introduce to you how you can use the data from within your fields inside your tables. And in the second part, we're going to dive one step deeper and learn about how you can work with text inside calculation and how you can merge multiple texts together to form a bigger text. And the last part is we're going to learn about something called function, which is a very important thing inside the calculation within FileMaker. And I'm going to get into that in a little bit later. So let's get started with part 1. So before diving straight into writing calculation formulas, let me first explain why calculation is so important in FileMaker. Now the main reason is that it's everywhere within the FileMaker software. For example, if you want to automate your database in the future and do that by writing script, you will notice that a lot of scripts that requires you to write a calculation result. So for example, if I use a set field script step like this, and I click into the detail, it will require me to write a calculated result that needs me to write a calculation formula. Or if I use a if step like this, if and end if, it will again require me to write a calculation. So calculation is pretty much the most important thing that you need to learn first before you're able to work with scripts and more advanced automation. That's why I want to dedicate a whole episode in talking to you about the basics of calculation. And so let's get back to the main tutorial. Okay, to get started, I want to start by creating a calculation field in here. So it's like the fourth field of this table. And for the first example, what I wanted to do is very simple. Is to just display a number. And I'll have that number as a number 2. And to create a calculation field, we can go to File, Manage, Database, and we're going to create a new field inside this contact table. So let's call this my calculation and name it, I set the type as calculation. Click create and you will notice that a calculation dialog box pop up. Now if you're new to FileMaker calculation, this might seem a little bit difficult to understand and a little bit overwhelming. But basically you can look into this dialog box as like a 3-part dialog box. So we have the left part here, which is used to select field and the field data. We have the right part here, which is used to select function. And the middle part here is where you will be typing in your formula. And I'll get into the left and the right part in later part of this tutorial. But first, let's go back to our example number 1. I just want to display a number, and the number is number 2. So all I need to do is to write in the formula 2, click OK, and click OK again. And the next thing I want to do is to place that calculation field inside this layout. So let's go to View, Layout Mode, and I'm just going to copy and paste this here. and double click onto this to select my calculation and maybe move this a little bit, and click View Browse Mode to look at it again. So now you will see that we have created a calculation field that will display the value 2 no matter what records we are in. Well, that's because we have set the formula result to be literally just 2. But don't worry, we're going to get a little bit deeper on each example. So the next thing I want to do is that showing this as only number 2 doesn't really do much for us. And because we not only we want just a formula to help us calculate math, we want to calculate what's inside our table. We want to use the data inside our field to make this calculation. So the next thing I want to show you is how you can draw out the data from the field and place it inside a calculation. So the next calculation I want to do is very simple. I just want to draw out the age and place it into my calculation. So it's exactly the same, these two. And let's see how to do it. So go to File, Manage, Database, and we are going to create a new calculation. So click onto the old calculation and press Duplicate to save some time. Double click, actually let's change the name, calculation number 2, and double click inside this. And what we're going to do is that we are going to use the age, right? So click onto the left side here. We are now at contact table and we want the field age. So double click and it will pop up the age here. Click OK and click OK, and we are going to change this field to our new field. So use Command L to go into layout mode. Double click into this and change the field. And go to browse mode with Command B. And you'll notice that now this calculation will automatically reflect the age we have here. So if I change the age to, let's say 29, and look into the other side, when I commit, it will also change to 29, which is pretty cool. And what we want to do next is to start working on the field data and using some math operators inside it. So what I want to do this time is to take the calculation, take the age data and then have it being multiplied by 2. So I will double the age and show it inside my calculation. So let's go to File, Manage, Database, and let's not create another one for now. Let's just use the age here and use it times 2 here. And click OK again. Click OK, and you'll realize that this calculation is automatically applying the age and times it by 2. And there's one very important thing I want to mention early on, is that you notice that in here we're trying to call the field data by writing just age. This is actually not the most proper way to write it, because this is only applicable if you're using a calculation field. But if you're writing a calculation formula inside a script, then this format will not work. The correct format is to write like this. So contact colon age. So basically in computer's language, that means I want to find inside the contact table and the field age. And take the data from it. So this is the way to properly write it, and writing it this way will make it also work inside the script. And in the future, inside this tutorial, I'm going to use this proper way so that you understand better what's going on, and you can apply this knowledge in other areas inside FileMaker as well, other than just a calculation field. And click OK and click OK. You'll notice that the result is exactly the same. Well, that's because we haven't really changed the formula, but we're just slightly changing it to the more proper way of writing it. And the next part is part 2. This is where we're going to work with text and how you can merge text together. So I want to start by creating a field that takes my name here and then apply it into the calculation. So let's go to File, Manage, Database, and duplicate this into my calculation number 3. Change this, double click to change what's inside. Now what I want to do is to take the name, right? Contact and colon name. So I want to take the name field from the contact table. Now it's very important to look into here, which is the calculation result. Now previously we are just doing math, so that's why our result can be number. But now we are trying to display a text as a result. So it's very important for us to set this as a text, or else it will not display properly. And then click OK. Click OK, and let's quickly change this to calculation 3. So I'm not going to go back into layout mode, browse mode anymore. I assume you already know what it is. And just keep continue. And you'll notice that we have successfully copy and paste the text here. And if we add something like this, then it's able to reflect on the other side of the calculation. So the next thing we want to do is that instead of referencing a field, I want to create something I call a string. Now I understand that some of you might not know what a string is, but let me follow through with this example first and then explain it afterwards so that you have a better idea of understanding what's happening. So the goal with my next example is that I want this calculation to show the word FileMaker Beginner, no matter which record I'm in. The way I do it is that I go to File, Manage, Database, and I'm going to duplicate a new calculation again. Let's call it calculation 4, change, and we are going to double click into this to change the option. In a very intuitive way, I'm going to write FileMaker Beginner here. And this is not going to go well. It's going to go wrong. And let me just show you how. When I click OK, it gives me an error because that's not the way I write a text inside a FileMaker calculation. The way I write it is by using a quote. That tells FileMaker that I want to create something called a string, which is like a kind of like a string of text or a string of character. And then when I click OK now, click OK again, and then I change this calculation to calculation 4, go back to browse mode, you'll notice that the word has now successfully appeared on every one of them. And this is a very important concept that you want to understand. And let me explain to you why in like a PowerPoint. So this has to do with something I call reference and string. Let's create like a visual hypothetical scenario. So I have a table, and inside the field, there's the word Sunny in here. And it's inside the contact table under the name field. So basically, this is like a reference of this information. So there's two ways I can have my calculation result to speak Sunny. The first way is by reference. So I can call, like what I did just now, contact column name. That will reference the name of this field, and then try to find what's inside it, and gives me the result Sunny. Or another way, I can create a direct string, like I did just now with a FileMaker Beginner, to just do quote, Sunny quote. It will also give me the result of Sunny. So this is like two different ways of how you can create text. But the most important thing to understand here is something like this. So let's say I changed the name within this thing, and instead of a Sunny, it's now changed to John. So what will happen is, using the same method, with a contact column name, the computer will now search for contact name, and then it will find the result John in there. But on the other side, if I'm using a string and using only Sunny, it will always be Sunny. So it's like a flat text that is not dynamic, it's always going to be fixed. And using a quote is how we can tell FileMaker calculation to show a fixed word. So now you know how to create a string. I want to take this example one step deeper, and what I'm going to teach you next is how you can merge multiple fields together. Now what I want to do is simple. Basically what I want to do is I want to take the name value and also the gender value. So the full sentence will be like, Sunny Chu is a male, Robinia Florentine is a female. So how are we going to do it? So let's go to File, Manage, Database, and create our next calculation. Change this, double click. Now we know that it's combined of 3 pieces of text. So let's say Sunny Chu. So it should be from contact column name. And the second piece of text will be is and the third piece of text will be contact dot gender. So these 3 pieces of text add together will construct our full calculation. But if we click OK now, it's not going to work. In order to indicate to FileMaker that these are 2 different blocks of text, we need to write an and sign between each of them. So if I turn them all back to one sentence, it looks like this. Contact name and is a and contact gender. Click OK. Click OK again, and let's see the result. So you'll see that we have in here Sunny Chu is a male, Robinia Florentine is a female. So that way we can merge multiple texts together and form into like a complete sentence. Now this particular use case is very good for creating automated email, because you can take the customer's information and automatically merge the information into one email that is basically pre-written, and then you can send this email to the customer and as if it's customized for them. So it's a very good automation tool that you can use in the future. Okay, so let's move on to the next example, and this is also going to be the final example of the text section, and this is what we're going to do. So what we're going to do is to create this sentence structure here. The double of the person's name's age is person's age times 2. Now it might sound a little bit confusing what I'm trying to do here. So here is the example. The double of Sunny's age is 56. And obviously we want Sunny to be taken from the contact table name and the age to be taken from the contact table as well, and have it times 2. So this is basically a combination of all we learned just now and combine it together into one mini challenge. And I would like to invite you to pause this video for a while and try to figure this out yourself, and then come back to this video and see what the actual answer is, because practice is what going to help you internalize how to write calculation. So I'm going to give you 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Do you get the answer? So the way that I will approach this is to first break these down into different text block. What I mean by a text block is something like this. So I added some color code to the text, and each color is kind of like its own block. So in the first block, the double of, we know is a fixed text, so we're going to create a string. The second block is the person's name. We know it's a reference. And the third block is the age is. It's also a fixed string. And then we have the person's age times 2, which is a reference plus doing some math. And the last block is the exclamation mark. Now, to turn this into the proper calculation format one by one, this is what we're going to do. First step, we're going to turn this into a string. Next step, we're going to turn this into a reference, which is calling name from the contact table. The third step is that we want to create this string here. The next step is the person's age, which we're going to take from contact table again, age from contact table, and then have it times 2. And the last step is to create a string for the exclamation mark. So together they look like this, and then after you're done with this, add the and sign between them, like this, so that you can have a full proper calculation. And let's see what happens when we put this calculation into the test. So I skip straight into the calculation field and I just copy and paste what I did in the PowerPoint into this calculation formula. And the double of contact name's age is contact age times 2 and an exclamation mark. And when I click OK and change this to calculation 6, change it again, layout mode, and change this. And this is what we have. The double of Sunny Chu's age is 56. Now we notice that the spacebar thing is a little bit weird, so we need to add an additional spacebar in our text. So let's go back to File, Manage, Database, and double click. We're going to add a spacebar after of, and we're going to add another spacebar after is. Click OK, and now it's looking so much better, and we have a full text of the double of Sunny Chu's age is 56. And this method is a very good example of how you can merge different texts together. And it's very good for future when you're creating emails to send to customer. It's very handy, very convenient. So that's basically it for part 1 and part 2. And now we're going to move on to part 3, which is going to be about function. So let me start by explaining what I want to do with this example. So notice I had the name here with both upper cap and lower cap. Now I want to create a calculation function that takes my name and turn it into all upper cap. So let's go to File, Manage, Database, and create a new calculation. Calculation 7, change, and now in order to do what I just described, turning everything into uppercase, we will need something called a function. So basically, functions are all the functions within FileMaker are here. And what function does is that they each serve a very specific function. Now for the use case I have for this example, what I want to use is the upper function. So if I search upper in here, double click into this, you will notice that there is a calculation formula already created with upper, quote, text, and quote. So basically, the way that functions are structured is that the function name will be placed first, and then afterwards you add a quote, and everything you put inside it will be the input of that function. And if I have to plot this into a graph, it would look something like this. Basically, you can think of function as like a robot that automatically manipulate your data. You put something inside the input, which we also call parameters. We put inside this robot. The robot will do something with it and give you back an output result. That's essentially what function is. And in this particular example, we have the upper function, and it requires the input of a text. So what we want to do is that we want to place the text inside this upper thing here. So we want to take the name, so like contact, colon, name, and this is the way that we structure it. So we are putting the contact name inside our upper function. Now in the graph, it kind of looks like this. So we have the original text, which is Sunny. We put it inside the upper function, and will come out as all uppercase. So let's just quickly save this and see what happens. Calculation 7. So as you see in here now, that when I put my name inside that upper function, all of them will be turned into uppercase, which is very useful. And additionally, you also have other functions like lower. So I think it's lower. Yeah, lower. It's like a reverse of upper, but it turns everything into smaller caps, as you can see from here. So it's a little it's very important to know that inside FileMaker there's always like a duality of function. So you have upper and then you have lower, and then you have a function called left, and usually it comes with another one called right. You have minimum, maximum. So it's easy for you to know if something exists is to see if the counterpart of it exists inside the function category. And as I said before, there is a lot of different functions in FileMaker, and you don't really need to learn all of them. And as a general business user, I probably only use like 20 or 10% of them, and most of the time I think there's at least half of them that I've never used before. But anyways, so let's move on to our next example. So let me check my list. The next example that we are going to do is I want to explain to you the concept of to further explain the concept of parameter. So the next part, the example we're going to do is that we are going to cut this name into half. Now for simplicity's sake, all of the data inside this database, it's constructed of a first name, last name, so there's no middle name or multiple word last name in here. And what I want to do is I want to cut out just the first name and paste it into my calculation. And to do that, we will need to use a function called left words. So let's go to File, Manage, Database, and create a new function, new calculation formula called left words. Now you can see when I'm typing it, it automatically gives me a suggestion. Now you will notice something weird happening. Now we have this text, semicolon, and number of words. So the reason why I want to introduce this example to you is I want to introduce you to the concept of multiple parameters. So this is a function that requires to have two different inputs of it. First, a text, and then second, number of words. And to plot this into like a graphical format, what the leftWords function does is that the first parameter, we're going to give them the full text. So let's say I'm giving them Sunny Chu as the full text. And then the second parameter is that from the left, how many words you want to extract from the original text. So if I say 1, then I will only extract the first word starting from the left, which is Sunny. Now, I want to expand this example just a little bit. So for example, if I have Sunny Chu Ka-ching, that's like my full name, and I want to show, I want to use the parameter as 2. What it does is that from the left, it will take 2 characters from my full text. I mean, it will take the first 2 words from my full text, and I place it inside the left values. It will give me Sunny Chu. So let's go back to our example here first and start with the simple one. I just want to take out the first name. So in the text here, I want to reference the contact, colon, name, like this. And on the other side, I want to choose 1 because I only want the first word from the original text. Click OK, and we are going to add calculation number 8. And you will notice that in here, it automatically extracts out the first word of the person's name, the full name. And this is also pretty handy if you're into like text like managing documents and the text within it. It's somewhat useful. But most importantly, the concept I want you to take away is the concept of multiple parameters. And if we look back into this example, the way that you separate between 2 different parameters is by adding a semicolon. So in the future, let's say if you have a function that has 3 different parameters, then you just add another semicolon and then start typing in the third input here, so that the function knows that you are entering 3 different parameters. And yeah, that's basically it. And on the side note, you can also play around with left and right. So there's a left words, then naturally there should be a right words, and click OK. And you'll notice this time it's the reverse, starting from the right, counting back to the left, and I'm getting Chu as my calculation result. And let's move on to the final example that I want to show you. Now, the previous one is pretty linear, pretty simple, and one of the most important calculation that you would need to learn is to how you can calculate different result based on different scenario. So for this example, what I want to do is that I want to detect if this person is a male. If he's a male, then I'm going to show Mr. If she is a female, then I'm going to call her Miss, MS. So for the sake of simplicity, I'm not going to get into like getting married and become Mrs., that kind of thing first. So very simple, male, Mr., female, Mrs. And in order to do that, we need a function called if. So let's get to the calculation part. Duplicate this, number 9, change and double click, remove all this, and I'm going to use the if function here. Now the if function is a little bit tricky. You can see that the format here is slightly weird. We are not only having like 2 semicolons to hold 3 parameters, we also have this thing here, which indicates to you that it's an optional parameter. So you can add 2 parameters here or 3 parameters here. So for easier to understand, let's just assume that this is a 3 parameter function. And it takes in 3 parameters. The first one is it needs to take in the test. And then the second one is a result number 1. And then result number 2. And let me just use the graph again to explain to you the situation. So basically what this does is that the test is like a assumption that you make. So let's say I have the contact gender equals to male. That means I will assume that the person is a male. and do a test on it. If the test result comes out as true, it will show me Mr., which is result number 1. If the test result come out as false, it will give me Miss. So together, if I put all 3 of these parameters inside the if, it will give me a dynamic result based on the test that I made. And let's see what happens. So to do that, I want to first set up a test. So I want to set up contact gender equals to male. And if this test result come out as true, we are going to return a text called Mr. And if the result comes out as false, we are going to return a result of Miss. Click OK, and add in the last calculation we have here. And you will notice that we have everything in place, and male, Mr., female, Mrs. So everything is kind of working really well together. And I think that's basically what I want to teach you today. And I just want to do a very quick recap of what we just did so that I can consolidate your memory of what's happening. So basically, we started off very in the first part of this tutorial, we learned how to create just a text, just a number, displaying a number. And then we learned how to reference a field data by using field, table name, and also 2 columns in between it. And then we also learned how to create a static text using a quotation and the difference between string and referencing a data. And then we also learned to merge them together by using an AND. And then the next step, we kind of do like a crazy exercise that combines everything together. And then we learn to use the function inside FileMaker, and we know that on the right side is a list of functions that FileMaker has, and it's based on the system of the function and also the input in here. And if there's multiple input, then you will need to use a semicolon and have it input number 1, input number 2, and put it inside this function. And lastly, we go over one of the most common used function, which is the if function. So first, we do a test. If the test result come out as true, then it returns this answer. If the result come out as false, it returns to the other answer. And this if function is going to be one of the most staple function that you'll be using. That's very versatile in helping you create automated calculation that lets FileMaker make decision based on your behalf, based on the logic that you define for it. So that's basically it for this tutorial. I hope you're able to get a little bit better understanding of what calculation is. I know this tutorial is kind of a little bit draggy, but what I'm trying to do here is to really explain to you in depth the calculation and all the essential basics that you need to learn. And once you understand this, every other thing that you learn about calculation is just building upon the basics that I just taught you. So forgive me for spending so much time in explaining like minor details, like just showing a number 2 on the calculation, which seems kind of stupid looking at it now. And yeah, that's basically it. And if you want to learn more about FileMaker and you're a beginner, I have a free email course in the link in the description down below that you can go and subscribe to, and yeah, it will sign you up inside my email course. It's about 12 weeks duration, and it will send you an email each week to guide you through the most essential basics of FileMaker. And that's basically it for this tutorial. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.